My name is Diane, and I did something a little silly. In December, I signed up for NetGalley and requested a handful of books that I was genuinely excited about that were coming out in the next few months. I did my best to make sure I wasn't requesting sequels to any series I hadn't already read yet, but a few weeks later I realized I made a mistake. One of the books I requested was a sequel to a book I had heard about and was interested in and just never got around to reading. Since publication day wasn't too far out, at first I thought I should probably cancel my request. There's no way I'm going to be able to read both of these books before this book comes out. But since publication day wasn't too far out, I thought maybe I can just leave my request. They'll probably reject me. No harm done. So I let it ride. And I was wrong. I got approved for an arc of The Sapphire Altar by David Dalglish. This is the second book in the Vagrant Gods trilogy, and I still haven't read the first book. The first book in the series is The Bladed Faith. This follows our main character Cyrus, whose country has been invaded, his god and his parents has been killed, and he's been held prisoner until a group of revolutionaries come and rescue him. They have the idea to make him the figurehead of their rebellion, training him to be the legendary assassin, the Vagrant. That all sounds great, right up my alley, but we're not reading that. We're reading the sequel. So while I still haven't read The Bladed Faith, I have read its sequel, The Sapphire Altar, and even without the background of the first book, I really enjoyed reading this. The beginning of this book contains a concise account of everything that happened in the first book, as well as who all the major characters are. This is a wonderful tool for epic fantasy readers, where there are a lot of things to keep track of, a lot of things to remember, especially if it's been a while since you read the first book. It's a great way to jog your memory without having to reread the previous book. And in my unusual circumstance, this was an invaluable tool to figure out what exactly we were building on with this book that I haven't read yet. So in this book we have 9 point of view characters, along with a bunch of other side characters. Each character is complex. They have their own unique feelings, motivations, and relationships. No one has a clear good or bad guy, although I think it's pretty obvious who we should be rooting for and who we really don't want to win. But everyone is doing what they think is right, even if they have to do some horrible things to get there. They all feel like very fleshed out characters. They're not just one-dimensional, there to serve a specific role. They all have their own wants and desires within this, as well as their own questioning of their own beliefs and the things that they're doing. It often comes into question the morality of what these characters are doing to achieve their goals. They have to do some pretty awful things, some pretty gruesome things. If you're sensitive to blood and gore, this may not be the series for you, but even with all of the fighting and bloodshed, it never felt too graphic or gratuitous. None of the fighting and gore was done for shock value, in my opinion. It all kind of had a place in the story. Each of the characters grows and changes as their beliefs come into question, the things they do affect them, and the information that they're learning along the way changes the way they feel about their situation and their role in what's going on in the world. The world, in turn, is also very large and complex. Each of the nations have their own cultures and religions and relationships with one another. It feels like a very well-developed, large world. And there's a map. And I love when books have maps. The plot largely centers around religious wars. Since all of these nations have their own cultures and beliefs, they all worship different gods, whether they're worshiping one god or many gods. The empire that has invaded this country of Thanet don't have the same gods, and the empire believes that their god is the one true god, and they should do away with worshiping all of the others in favor of everyone worshiping the same god. What I really like about this religion system is that all the gods not only represent something specific, but they also have their own personalities, traits, and relationships with one another. When people pray and worship, there's an immediate, tangible outcome, which I think is really cool to see. When people pray, they see or feel an immediate response from the God that they're praying to. People can communicate with them. They can interact with them in a very tangible way. It's not just worshiping to something that you never see or experience. there's very real outcomes to all of the prayer, worship, and sacrifices that are happening. Gods also serve as the root of the magic system in this world, which oftentimes blurs the lines between worshiper and God. This book contains a lot of action, but there's enough downtime in between everything to really process what's happened. There's a lot of fighting, but it all felt very easy to follow. Sometimes battle scenes can feel a little too fast-paced and chaotic, and it's very easy to follow, I think, what's happening in each of these battles, and there are a good amount of them, but we do get some downtime to really get to know the backstory of the characters, what they're thinking and feeling about what's going on, how their opinions and roles are changing as new things come up. It's written very clearly where we get a good sense of what's going on with everyone, what's going on in the world and the places, but none of it's over-described. It's pretty concise in the writing, in that I felt like I had enough information to understand everything and be engaged with everything that was going on, even though I was missing an entire book's background within this world and with these characters. I still never felt like I was lost in what was happening or disconnected from anything. I do also really like that even though this does lean on the darker side of things, it's all about war and there's some pretty terrible things going on. Our characters are really going through it, but there's always these little moments between them that really break the tension. Sometimes the character's taking themselves a little too seriously, and the people around them will let them know and maybe make fun of them just a little bit. And I think that added to it feeling more realistic and believable, that they're not just sitting around sulking and brooding. They're people who have known each other for years at this point, and they're going through some pretty tough things together. So I think it's natural that there's at least a little bit of humor here and there. It's certainly not a comical book, but it does break up the tension of things a little bit with a little bit of humor, a little bit of banter, a little bit of romance too. Overall, I really thought this was a great book. It was really well written. It had a lot of things going on that were easy to understand, and I really had a lot of fun with it. If you like multiple point of view stories in rich, well-developed worlds with morally gray characters that change and grow throughout the story, plenty of action, I would definitely recommend checking this series out, although I would recommend that you start with the first book, The Bladed Faith. A huge thank you to Orbit and NetGalley for providing me with a copy of this book. I really had a lot of fun reading it. I'm definitely going to be anticipating the third book whenever that comes out, and maybe I'll even read the first book in the meantime. Let me know if you've read this book and what you thought of it, or if you're planning to read this book. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next time.